All right, we are in week 2 of our series that we're calling One, and I want to remind everybody, all of February, the person or the couple who brings the most first-time guests will get a paid trip for 2 nights in Sandestin, Florida. You got spending money, you got expenses covered too. Now, here's the thing: I need everybody to make sure that you register. And you get your guests to mention you on their Connect cards, okay? Because that's how we're going to count your guests. We need at least, you'll need at least 5 to qualify for this. And so you're going to really want to be a part of this, all right? Now, last weekend we talked about how before we can really have a great relationship, have a great friendship or a dating relationship with people or a strong marriage, we need to pursue God's healing in every area of our life. Now, we talked about this, and I want to remind us of this. You and I, we were all born into a world that's full of disconnection. You know what? Things are created to be a certain way, and they're not, and things are out of place, and you and I, we can all feel it. And we have this longing to connect with God, and we have this longing to connect with each other. But there's this invisible barrier that keeps us from this. And today we're going to talk about how all the disconnection begins. And that's why we're going to be talking about sex and sexuality today. Okay? Let me show you how the disconnection begins. Because the word sex is related to the Latin word secare, which means to sever, to amputate, or disconnect from the body. From this word, we get the words sect, section, dissect, and bisect, all right? So just in the very nature of the word sex, we see how that our sexuality has 2 parts. We have this awareness of how disconnected we are, and we have this awareness of all the ways we're trying to reconnect with God and with each other through this, okay? And because much of our lives is connected to our sexuality, when we start talking about sexuality, we end up talking about spiritual things. Somebody like, how in the world? Not anywhere where I went. Well, think about it. And when we talk about our sexuality, it turns spiritual because we can't talk about sexuality without talking about how we were made. And we can't talk about how we were made without talking about how we feel about God at some point. All right? So sex and God, the God of the Bible, are connected. They can't be separated. Where one is, you're going to find the other. To make sense of one is to explore the other. So watch this. When you and I read the book of Genesis, we need to understand that there is this divine order to creation, okay? That God created certain things first, all right? And the reason why he created certain things first was those things that were created first are to serve the things that come after it, all right? So watch this. Genesis 1:25. God made the wild animals according to their kind, the livestock according to their kind, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds, and God saw that it was good. Notice with me. We see in the Bible that God creates animals before he creates people, all right? And in this order, God is really wanting there to be a clear separation of human beings from everybody else, all right? So look at this. After this verse, it says, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that he may rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So today, how we're going to talk on sex and sexuality, we'll go into much more detail on Wednesday night. We have to talk about creation and how God created us. The first thing that we see that God gave human beings at creation was his image. Very important that we catch that during this series, okay? Because God is showing us that from the beginning, he created us differently from everything else. And he wants us to see that very clearly. Human beings have a spiritual dimension that the rest of creation don't have. And Moses, the writer of Genesis, makes it clear that there's something different about human beings than all the rest of creation. Human beings aren't God. They aren't going to become God, but in some clear, distinct way, something of God has been placed inside of us. And because we reflect who God is and what God is like. And ladies and gentlemen, there's never been a human being born that does not have the divine image of God imprinted on them. Do you know that? It's resting inside of us. And here's the thing. You and I can't really appreciate people until we understand their value. And our society is in trouble when we forget that people were created in the image of God. But first we have to understand our value. I've had people from time to time, a lot of ladies that have talked with me, and they said, man, Chad, I struggle with self-image so bad. I struggle with low self-esteem, and I struggle with self-worth. And maybe, and there's been a couple of guys that have opened up to me, but predominantly there have been ladies that have just been horrible relationships. They had a horrible family and everything. And they said, Chad, I just feel worthless on such a regular basis. And ladies and gentlemen, what you and I have to understand is our value when we feel like that. Our value is this. What is my worth, Pastor Chad? You are worth God's son. That's a game changer, ain't it? When all of a sudden I understand, what am I worth? I was worth God's son. God sent his son to die for me. It's a game changer. We have to understand our value. I've had dinner a couple of times with some guys who were like uber millionaires. And I've learned that they think about money different than we do. I remember with this one guy, every time we went somewhere, this dude was a gazillionaire. And that fool would only drink water. We'd be up in there and I was like, all right, hold on a second. You have drunk enough sweet tea at your house to float a battleship. Why in the world, every time we go out to eat, you only drink water? And he said, because, Chad, for me, a glass of sweet tea is not worth $2.50. I was like, there's a reason why this dude's a millionaire. You know? They think about money different. My grandmother thinks about money a lot different than everybody else. This week, she was at the hearing aid doctor. The doctor looked at her and he goes, well, Miss Stafford, you're going to need a hearing aid. And she goes, well, how much does it cost? And he said, between $5,500 and $6,200. My grandmother looked at him and said, honey, there ain't nothing on this planet worth paying $6,200 that I want to hear. You know, because to her, $6,200 is $6,200. So, by the way, y'all wonder where we get this from, all right? Understanding that you and I were made in God's divine image will be a game changer for us and for our culture. Because if you've never noticed this, billions of dollars are made simply because people don't know their value. You know that? If people really knew their value, restaurants where the women's uniforms devalue women would not be in existence. And by the way, guys, I want to challenge you right now. Don't be one of those old creepy perverts that go and frequent these restaurants. Well, brother, I can go without have you had their chicken wings before? So we can throw away somebody's value for a freaking chicken wing? You know, I can go to them places and not look. Love women enough not to go to a place where they're objectified. That's right. And ladies, listen to me. I get it. You got a nice figure, but you're more than your figure. You're a human being made in the divine image of God who doesn't have to show off their body. That's good. So think about this. If men and women knew their value, TV shows like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette would not be on. Oh, if he would just give me a rose. If she would choose me, I'd feel so valuable. What if in the casting of this, they said, hey, look, you've been selected for The Bachelorette or The Bachelor. They're like, what would happen if a woman looked at, or a guy looked at and said, thank you for the invitation, but yeah, I don't try out. I know who I am and I know whose I am, and I will not devalue myself and stand up there like an animal at a livestock auction and hope that you choose me. That's right. Preach on, Pastor Chad. I'm going to. Don't you worry about it. Guys, gentlemen, think about this. The greatest day in our lives is not the day that we scored the touchdown or hit the game-winning home run or made president of the company. The greatest days of our lives is the day that we realized and discovered that we were made in the image of our Creator, because it's a game changer when we do that. Ladies, the greatest day in our lives is not our wedding day, and it's not the day we became a mother. It's the day we discover that we are made in the divine image of our Creator. Everything in our life flows out of our identity in God. Okay? So the first thing that God gave each and every human being was his image to bear. The second thing that God gave human beings at creation was their gender. Okay? The next verse says this. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Watch this. Just for those of us who are biblical scholars. Think about this. Anytime when you read the Bible and you see redundancy, God is trying to make a point there. All right? So it's kind of like, yeah, what is this, Pete and repeat? Look at this. It says this. God created mankind in his own image. And it says it again. In the image of God, he created them. Now watch this. Male and female, he created them. This is going to be a very important part of our series that you know this. You know all this. But I want you to notice with me. Their identity was not in their gender. Their identity was based on the fact that they were made in the image of God. Okay? Until my understanding is that I'm made in the image of God, gender identification will always be a problem in our society. Okay? Let me let you know something. I don't sit in judgment of transgender people. All right? I have no idea what the struggle is. We have some that attend here. All right? And we are going to, hey, look, God bless you for showing up. We're going to treat you with honor, dignity. Come do life with us. We're not ashamed. Let me tell you something, though. We love you just as you are. But here's what we got to understand. When you and I become confused about gender, it's because we were first confused about in whose image we were made. There's two genders. That means that there's two roles. We're going to talk more about gender identification and gender equality in this series. But here's the fun part. We noticed that women were made different from men and vice versa. All right. Some of you are like, I'm learning that. I've been married 35 years and it just hit me the other day. All right. That's the reason why you're here. But listen to me. Men are driven emotionally by sight, and women are driven emotionally by touch. Psychologists tell us that. All right. So first, I'm going to talk to our ladies. Ladies, you have a mystery about you that drives us men crazy. All right, and here's what I got to let you know. It's good and it's from God. All right? It's the power of being a woman that men just don't understand. All right? Smart women know this and they use it as a weapon. All right? But here's the thing. When a lady, when you see somebody who's a lady that is dressed immodestly, and I'm not pointing anybody out in here or anything like that. When a lady dresses immodestly, they lose their mystery and their power with men. How? Because we've seen it now. Okay? The more of your body that you reveal, the more of the mystery that surrounds your feminine soul is lost. Okay? The more of the mystery you reveal also reveals our perception of our self-worth. Because my worth comes from being able to be noticed by guys. Can I just let you know? The less we wear, the less we feel about ourselves. Please understand, ladies, this isn't body shaming or anything about this. I just want to challenge you to know your value and have work this for your benefit. Okay? Now, many of y'all know that I was a student pastor, and man, I still love students so much. It's one of the reasons why I love First Wednesday so much, because all of our students are in here. But I remember I was talking about this, and there was a gal. She loved me, and I loved her. And she came up to me, and please forgive the crassness, but you know, when you work with teenagers, that's going to happen. She came up to me and goes, "Pastor Chad, really like the message tonight." I was like, "Okay, so thanks, sweetheart." She goes, "But I got a point to make." And I said, "What's that?" She goes, "Just because a girl dresses slutty doesn't mean she's a slut." And I was like, you know what? You are exactly right. And I said, how dare we assume that? You know? And then I had a little fun with her. And I was like, but let's just suppose somebody steals your purse in the parking lot. Who are you going to go looking for? Well, somebody that can help you, right? And what if you run up to somebody sitting in a cop car, wearing a cop uniform, and a badge that says, "Officer, that man stole my purse. Apprehend him." It'd be kind of weird if that person looked at you and say, "How dare you assume that I'm a cop? Just because I'm wearing a cop's uniform, wearing a cop badge, sitting in a cop car." And she looked at me, and so I always give the moral of the story. And I looked at her, I said, so the moral of the story is this. You are exactly right. The girl who dresses slutty is not a slut. However, she is wearing a slut's uniform. All right? And so anyway, I told you, man, I love teenagers. Man, but here's the reason why I'm telling you this. I say all that because how should a woman view herself? And what's the criteria for you finding a man? Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Your dating relationship should reflect what Jesus did for the church. What did Jesus do for the church? He laid down his life. You see, which gives you this whole, ladies, this should give us a whole brand new understanding of your value to God, value to yourself, and to your humanity. Listen to me, ladies. I said all that to say this. Look at me, and I want to see the whites of your eyes when I make this point. Ladies, you are worth dying for. I want you to think about this. If he isn't willing to die for you, then he is not worthy of you and should not have you. If he's not willing to sacrifice his desire and urges now, then he should be discarded. What would happen if more ladies in our society believed this? Or if they actually believed this, that they were worth dying for? They got this. So let's just do this scenario where guys pressuring a girl to have sex before they're married. By the way, if you're in a relationship like that right now, kick that fool to the curb. I was expecting a few more amens than that. Y'all wake up. Hurt my feelings a little bit, all right? No, think about this. By the way, you got to understand, we're going to talk about sex and sexuality because there's a completely different makeup with guys and girls when it comes to sex. Girls need a reason to have sex. Guys just need a place. Like, oh, in front of here? Like here on the stage? Like in front of, yeah, I'm down. You know, every guy's kind of like looking and it's like, he's absolutely right, you know. So let's just say that this typical guy is saying, hey, baby, if you love me, then you'd have sex with me. A young lady that understands her value says, if you love me, you'd lay down your life for me. then a guy will say anything to get somebody in the sack. I mean, come on. I mean, we know that. Well, I would. You know, I'd die for you. I mean, don't let somebody come around with a gun. I mean, I'll take that. The guy will say, I would. I just want sex now. By the way, ladies, no matter what they say, if you don't let a guy have sex with you, he's not going to die. I use that excuse. Do you know there's documented cases of guys that just like exploded? I mean, literally exploded into a billion different pieces because a girl turned him down. It's not going to happen, all right? If a guy goes, no, man, I'd die for you. I just want to have sex now. The girl who values herself will look at him and say, well, then die now. Think about it this way. If she loses the sense that she's worth dying for and gives herself to him in the most intimate way, you know what she does? She lets him off the hook. The pattern in the Bible that says this, I will give you me when you give me you. Okay? In the Bible, sex means marriage. You sleep together, you're married. Let me give you a point in case. This is pretty strong. You see, when she's given everything to you, you have to give everything to her. Exodus 22:16 says this, if a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married with and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price and she shall be his wife. So when you do, you did. She getting half a error thing. All right? In the Bible, sex is actually what determined marriage. I'm like, what are you talking about? After the wedding ceremony, after, you know, they come together and they, you know, the preacher's there, everybody's celebrating everything. In the Old Testament, what would happen is that friends and family would go to the party, but the bride and groom would go to the wedding chamber and knock boots. All right? And after they were done, that's when the marriage license was signed. So sex actually began the marriage, and you couldn't disconnect the two. After you had, here's the thing that we got to understand. We got to bring back into our society. And I want to continue to, ladies and gentlemen, continue to preach abstinence to your children, regardless of whether you screwed up or not. Why? Because we have to let our children know, we have to let society know that after sex, nobody's supposed to leave and go home. Because you are home. You are one. You are together. You're bonded together. For those who, in our society, everybody's living together before they get married for the most part. And here's the thing. There's no risk with that. You know, we treat our relationships with one another like we do our Spotify account. We just have us a free trial basis. Well, Pastor Jed, I got to kick the tires before I buy the car, you know. No, that is, yeah, it's culturally relevant right now, but it's a total myth. It absolutely and totally messes up sexuality. It messes up our value and it messes up our understanding of ourselves. And I'm so proud of the couples in our church who recognize this. I've been talking about this for 7 years, and there have been people that have said, you know what, dude, they repented before God and with each other. They got married and they said, we're in this together. You know why? Because the guy proved to the girl, you are worth dying for. And can I let you know something? They're some of the happiest couples in our church. You know, here's the thing. If you don't know if this person that you're with, you want to marry, you need to stop sleeping with them. And, well, Pastor Chad, this is the person that I want to marry. So what do you say about that? You need to stop sleeping with them. And then you need to get in some premarital counseling. And then you need to get married. And then after you get married, let your freak flag fly. All right? Every day. All right? I mean, just have fun. Use your liberty. You know, think about this. We're going to be talking on Sunday about on Wednesday, about how much the lies about sex. And it's going to be great. So the last thing that we see that God gave human beings at creation was their purpose. All right? Look at verse 28. By the way, every guy in the world should have this memorized because it is an awesome commandment. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. You know what that means? Go have sex. Have fun. Some of you guys are going to use that scripture this afternoon and say, sweetheart, the kids are gone. We need to be obedient. Matter of fact, we need to be obedient all day. Anyway, an increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every other living creature that moves on the ground. So watch this. God gave us an image to bear and a gender to identify us, and then he gave us something to do. He said, take care of the world, move it forward, and bring heaven to earth. All right? Every person that God created, he created with his image. And when you and I forget that, that's where the disconnect happens. The disconnect begins when we no longer see people as God sees them. Last weekend was our 73rd anniversary of the liberation of the German concentration camps at Auschwitz. The Holocaust that occurred in Europe killed 6 million Jews. And by the way, if you're checking out our church and wanting to know what some of the things that we stand for, let me tell you something. I stand for, and Coastal Church stands with our Jewish brothers and sisters, and we stand united and we say, never again. Never again will it happen to Jewish people. Never will it again happen to another race of people ever in the history of the world. It will go over our dead body. And before we think that the lesson has been learned and we should just put this awful part of history behind us and just move on, that's where the problem lies, ladies and gentlemen, because anti-Semitism has returned to Europe with a vengeance. It is routine and it's just a return to the norm. The shame of the Holocaust just created a hiatus where Jew hatred just became socially unacceptable for a couple of years. But you know what? It's back. And here, read documentation on this. Go and see how many Jewish people hold political offices in Europe right now. You ain't going to see very many because there's a discrimination that's there. And folks, it's bigger than Europe. For the first time in 2,000 years, Israel has the largest Jewish community on the planet and the biggest threat to those that live in their region. Hamas calls for the eradication of Israel and for the killing of Jews everywhere. Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah welcomes Jewish immigration to Israel. You know why? He said it's going to make all the killing easier. He said, if all the Jews gather in Israel, it'll save us the trouble of having to go and hunt them worldwide. Iran openly declares as its sacred mission the annihilation of Israel. They have declared Israel as a one-bomb country. And so, folks, it took the Nazis 7 years to kill 6 million Jews. It would take Iran just one day. That's the seriousness of some things. And I praise, you know I'm not a political guy, and if you want to know who I voted for, you can ask me individually, but I don't play that game, and I will not hurt the pulpit in any way in something like that. But I can tell you one thing, I praise the God of heaven and earth for the more active role that America is now taking in our involvement with Israel. Do you know why? Well, Pastor Chad, you know what, man, I don't think we need to get mixed up over there. No, ladies and gentlemen, you need to remember what Elie Wiesel once wrote. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. It's not enough to simply mourn those who were lost in the Holocaust. We have to show solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters who are still living. So some of you are like, Pastor Chad, what made you get off on that? You're talking about sex, and now you're talking about the freaking Holocaust. How did we get there? Why did I say all this? Why am I so passionate about this? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we have to ask ourselves the question, how do things like the Holocaust occur? See, it's really easy. When we treat people like objects, we literally bring hell to earth. What are we talking about? The Me Too movement is showing this. Are you seeing? I hope if you're a Christ follower and you're a man, I pray with everything that keeps coming out that you're grieved in your spirit about how people have misused their power, raped and exploited women for years and years, and we're just now talking about it. From Hollywood to Washington, D.C., we have literally brought the forces of evil here. You see, look at me. Gentlemen especially, when a person becomes a that, we are so far from the presence of God that we begin to welcome the type of depravity that literally destroys the earth. How did racial situations happen in America? Can you imagine? I want to talk to the white people real quick. Can you imagine for hundreds of years the shame that in our African American brothers and sisters that have had to endure for hundreds of years? They were taught that they were 3/5 of a person. And whenever that begins to happen, guess what? You begin to see people like objects. And then you begin to ship them over here on ships, and you begin to exploit them. And you begin to do this. Let me tell you something. There was a curse on our nation for doing that. And God help us to redeem that curse. Think about this. You see, whenever you and I see people as objects, we welcome hell literally into our place, into our country, into our lives. You see, gentlemen, when a man sees a lady walk by and he says the phrase, "Look at that," she's a human being. See, are you following me around the barn here? When a person becomes a that, when we use words like, "I'd like to get some of that," or we're around a group of guys and we say, "How would you rate that?" You see, that's the way the Nazis justified their slaughters, where they didn't even consider their captives human beings. And when you and I use that type of verbiage, we are literally bringing about the same spirit that brought about the deaths of 80 million people in World War II, because they didn't see them as people either. You see, when you and I use that verbiage, it means that we've forgotten that these people were made in the divine image of God. And it's not just the language of racists. It's not just the language of sexual perversion. It's bigger and it's even worse than that. When we say and feel these images, we say these things, we have literally lost the image of God inside of ourselves. Exploiting immigrants. By the way, let me let you know something. And I know there's nobody in here like this. If you have immigrants working for you and you're paying them less than everybody else because you can, the judgment of God will come upon you. God does not screw around with that type of stuff. Think about this. When we treat somebody with a lack of honor because they're a different race, if we use racist terms and from objectifying people for sex, it won't just rob them of their humanity. It robs us of our humanity. Can I challenge you also, my white brothers and sisters? Right now, you got to explore more narratives than the ones that we got raised around. There's a white narrative. There's an African American narrative. There's a Hispanic narrative. And we have to go and have dinner and lunch and say, "Guys, I've been taught to believe this. Is what I'm seeing accurate?" This is called being in community with one another. It's called being able to say, "You know what? We are going to, I've understood that my way of understanding may completely different than yours. And as long as there's breath in my body, Coastal Church is going to make a dent in this. And we are going to be a part of a movement of racial reconciliation that the world has never seen." See, when we do these things, when we do all of these things, we become less human and we turn into monsters. And we become people we never dreamt possible. Jesus addresses an issue about a woman becoming a that in Matthew chapter 5. Take a look at me, and we're going to wrap this up soon. It says this: "You've heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." What Jesus is saying here is that, you know what? We're all bearers of the divine image of God. And then here's what Jesus does. It's so brilliant. He connects our eyes, our intentions, and our thoughts with the state of our hearts. And then he says that our hearts reveal our understanding of heaven and hell. Okay, watch this. To the Jewish perspective, their understanding at this time, heaven wasn't just some place that was other than this world. Heaven was literally a place where God intends for them to be, where everything, everyone, and everywhere were under the rule and reign of God. But if there's a place where everything is where it's supposed to be, then there's also a place where things aren't supposed to be. And where there are people that aren't treated as fully human. That place, ladies and gentlemen, is called hell. Hell is a place that's void of any love, peace, beauty, or meaning. It's the absence of the presence of God. There is a real hell. And people who do not have a relationship with Christ will spend there forever in eternity. But here's the thing. Many of us can testify about certain hellish things. Many of our brothers who have been in war zones, they've described the situation as hellish. I've talked with guys from Iraq saying, Chad, I saw stuff that no human being should ever see. I've seen children slaughtered. The Vietnam vets who said, man, I still, they're still in counseling. So war zones are hellish. Famine is hellish. If you ever go to a place where there's rampant famine, you can just say, there's no peace, there's no presence of God here. What is the media describing those children who were chained to their beds in California? What are they saying the situation was like? They're like, these were hellish conditions. Concentration camps were literal hells on earth. Now that we know this, let's read the next two verses. It says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. Now watch this. Jesus here, the reason why he's saying it's better for you to gouge out your eye if you find yourself lusting after a woman, he's not advocating self-mutilation, all right? So I don't want to hear anybody calling me from the emergency room today. I looked lustfully at that chick and I just got no, all right? What Jesus is saying here is actually bigger, all right? It's more serious. He's saying that something seriously hellish happens when people are treated like objects. And you and I should resist it at all costs. Because how we treat creation shows how we feel about the Creator. And here's the thing. We have to recognize that all people, everybody, matters to God. Every person, every kindred, every tribe, every race, every sexual orientation were made in the image of God just like us, and we have to honor the differences and affirm the differences, because here's what the whole point of it is this. When we respect the image of God in others, we protect the image of God in ourselves. When I train my eyes to bounce instead of looking lustfully at somebody, it's not just because I love God and love my wife and I want to protect God's anointing and blessing on my life. It's much bigger than that. I've moved my eyes away from temptation because I love myself too. And I don't want to turn into a person who's capable of absolute depravity. And I never want to go back to that person that I was 23 years ago. I love myself enough to turn away, because when I do, I protect the image of God inside of me. And here's the thing. The good news about all this, some of you are like, well, Chad, I struggle with this. Maybe you're a gal and you struggle with self-image, or you're a guy here and you struggle with lust. You and I can be delivered back to our original design. You know that? No matter how badly we've messed it up to this point. You know why? Because that's my story. I had that problem before I gave my life to Jesus. Teenagers, I'm asking you to be better than I was. Before I gave my life to Christ, I slept with anybody who was willing to sleep with me. Any gal that was willing, hey, look, I had no value. I didn't respect the value of God in them, and I didn't respect the value of God in myself. And after I gave my life to Christ, it took some time. There's a lot of shame that's associated with sexual sin, guys. And I had to understand how God had made me, and I had to understand how God had made women. I didn't get that. And I spent a long time repenting. You know what I actually did? After I finally came to a crossroads in my relationship with God, I just said, God, from here on out, I've made mistakes up to this point. I can tell you this. I don't know who you have in store for me, but the next woman that I'll have sex with will be my spouse. And I'm just going to trust you to help get me through this. I was in 1993. I ain't getting married till 1997. So whenever I challenge you to abstain from sexual relationships until you're married. I can do so with some authority because I did it. You can do this. I trust you. I believe in you. You're stronger than I was. So I'm asking you, understand your value. Take me up on this challenge, and God will give you the grace to do it. There's this church in the New Testament that's just like us. It's the church at Corinth. Church at Corinth, the city's on the water. The church was young and vibrant and growing in their influence. And they're new to the things of God. So like most of us, they messed up this whole sexuality and the image of God thing pretty bad. And their founding pastor writes them back. And he writes to them and he addresses this issue with them. And he addresses all the issues where they fell short with this. Now watch this. It says this in 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10. It says, don't you know that wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Don't be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, or men who have sex with men, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor the drunkards, nor the slanderers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And boy, he gives them both barrels. But I'm so glad he didn't stop there, because the next verse has been a game changer for me, and it can be a game changer for you. You can borrow this one. It says this, and that is just what some of you were. It's done. He said that's what some of you were. You were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. When he says that's what some of you were, he's saying you got the original image of God back. He said you're on the other side of all this now. So ladies, I want to one more time let you know you are my sisters in Christ. You are worth dying for because you have the image of God inside of you. Please never forget that, and please protect that image. Don't worry about having to get a man and doing anything to keep one. Realize your worth. Men, you're my brothers, and I love you so much. Let's love God, love ourselves, and love women enough to protect the divine image inside of them. And let's not objectify, ogle, or leer at them, because something dies inside of us every time we do that. God wants to restore that original image back. And we've all been given a divine image from God. And when we recognize that in ourselves and others, that is when the Gulf Coast